and that it appears to the ear in a particular way. These are all appearances. Independent of appearances, the ontological aspect of a thing, what it is, the reality of a thing, is unknown and unknowable. My contention is that when consciousness is going to feel consciousness matter, when consciousness is going to feel non-conscious matter, it will have to pass through a conscious area to meet the material object. So the full perception of that material thing cannot but be conscious. So this is important. A little pause here. I just want to highlight this, what Param Guru Mahārāj said. The basis of this you will find in Bhagavad Gita. If we look into the granularity of what is being said in Bhagavad Gita, that there are various levels of you can say Shakti, or the Lord's energy. So there are different energies. So the external energy is described as Bhumi, Rapa, Vanalo, Vayo, Kham, Mano, Buddhi, Revacha, Ahankar, Itiyam, Me, Bhinna, Prakritir, Ashtadha. This is Prakriti, or the external energy: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, ego. These are the 8 elements, Panch Mahabhut, and then the 3 subtle elements. This altogether is the external energy. Then the Lord goes further to explain another level. He says, Apareyam itastwanyam prakritim viddhime param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharate jagat. Apareyam itastwanyam. So there is a clear distinction between this material energy that I just explained and this higher energy, marginal potency that I'm explaining, which is called Jiva Bhut. So there is a very, very clear distinction between the 2 levels. And what Param Guru Mahārāj is explaining here is that degradation of consciousness has to happen for higher energy to come and touch lower energy. Does that make sense? So that's why he's saying non-conscious matter, which is the external energy, when that higher energy, marginal potency, is coming down and then actually feeling and touching the external energy, it can't really do it unless that external energy is also conscious. That non-conscious matter is also conscious. So it has to go through that degradation phase and then be able to touch it. So that conscious, what he's explaining is conscious area to meet, will have to pass through a conscious area to meet the material object. Does that explain it? I mean, does that sound?
Prabhu,
Yes.
well, you're saying for a conscious entity, a personality to come into the material world, that has to go through a change of consciousness.
Correct. A hazy phase, and then it will come in contact with that material substance.
So there is a difference between the material substance and the conscious entity?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why constitutionally they're different.
And that material energy is not eternal.
But yes, it is eternal.
It is eternal.
Yes.
But is that material energy, it's not a conscious entity?
Yes, it is.
Okay, now I'm confused.
Material, see, everything's consciousness. The basis is consciousness, but you can say for trying to understand it, in an easy way, is that the nature and the extent of consciousness differs or there is a gradation even in consciousness. That's what Param Guru Maharaj is explaining, or trying to explain, that gradation of a higher grade or a finer substance, which is the Jiva Bhut. How does it actually come and touch material objects? It can happen without this intermediary stage that he's explaining, that it comes through that hazy phase, Chidabhas, and then it kind of comes. It can come and touch material energy. Otherwise, it can't.
So, for my example, I can have a conscious experience when I'm in contact with, say, this computer.
Right.
Some conscious contact with that energy.
Right.
That I'm perceiving.
Right.
The computer is also
conscious.
Is also perceiving me.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is very difficult to understand. The first time I read this, and Śrīdhar Maharaj was saying the color red has personality,
yeah. That's why we try and get together and see if together we can understand a little better.
But my perception, because my consciousness is at a higher level, I'm having more interaction or understanding of my environment than, say, my computer would have of me.
So your original consciousness, not material consciousness, so it has gone through that degradation and come down to this level. But the original pure consciousness, constitutionally, you are of a finer and a higher grade than the material energy.
Okay.
So there is no intersection possible. And it becomes possible by this process that Param Guru Maharaj is explaining. Otherwise, that's why the ones, it is said that the persons who actually get reinstated into their original consciousness find that they have nothing to do with this world. And Vairagya comes. What is Vairagya? Ultimately, Vairagya is this fine point that I have nothing to do with matter. Vairagya doesn't mean changing clothes. Right? Vairagya means coming to this realization, not simple understanding, but realization that I have nothing to do with this matter. Constitutionally, I'm different. Then there is Vairagya. True Vairagya.
And so, Prabhu, if I may ask another?
Sure.
So, we're told that we are a conscious soul, but our bodies are made of atoms, which are also, we are told, every atom is conscious.
Right.
So, and every atom, if every atom is conscious, that means there's a soul there as well. Correct?
Soul, you could say the origin of everything is consciousness. So not every atom has a soul. I mean, that will be not right, because we just went through that we're marginal potency. So soul is actually really, kind of the marginal potency is referring to the soul plane. And within that, there is also the basis of the material energy. So material energy is also based on consciousness. Sarva khalva idam brahma. Sarva khalva idam brahma. That's what is said. Final analysis and final vision is that everything is alive and everything is conscious. Every atom is conscious. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has a soul. I mean, every atom, we can't say that has a soul, but it is conscious.
So there's a differentiation between consciousness and jiva soul.
Consciousness per se of the jiva or of the level of the jiva, and consciousness per se of the level of external material energy.
Okay.
And then there is higher levels of consciousness, finer levels of consciousness. So this is Param Guru Maharaj. This is how high the subject is dealing with this gradation within the plane of consciousness. That's what we're studying. It's, Param Guru Maharaj is taking us through that. It's within consciousness, and then trying to differentiate the various levels within consciousness. And he's explaining how one level is coming down to feel the other level, and what is that like process of coming down and being able to be in touch with matter. Like Arun Prabhu explains that quantum entanglement. So how does that become possible? Entanglement will become possible when that higher energy goes through that degradation process and comes within the same spectrum of, let's say, frequency, and then it engages and entangles. Otherwise, it won't be possible. Yes, Arun.
So actually, yesterday and today, I was viewing some program by some top scientists, physicists, and dealing with the quantum world, time, space, and entanglement. And I found it very, very refreshing, and I could understand and relate to it, because what Param Guru Maharaj is explaining and what our Vedanta has given, it is perfectly in line with it. So one of the aspects that is now drawing into the top echelons of the physicists is that what is there is something that we don't understand, yet the time and the ability to perceive something, for example, it is based on entanglement only. So if we start to dissect and reduce the entanglement, and here I'm talking about people, physical people or other entities, Earth, planets, galaxies, and everything else. So what was interestingly seen was that when the entanglement reduces, then this time-space actually vanishes. That is the current understanding of the people. So that kind of gives an insight to that we are a three-dimensional object. At least we are the material perceptions that we have. We see everything in three-dimensional, maybe four dimensions. The three physical dimension and the time. But really there are higher dimensions there, and the variegatedness there, it is hard for us to perceive except through examples, where we can get some glimmering insight to what that substance is. So it was very, very interesting to see the keyword entanglement and who is the experiencer, what it is getting entangled with, and then that gives this illusion of time and space. So that was interesting to me. And then obviously, not everybody is cut out to be a quantum scientist or a scientist or this or a musician or something, right? So at times it may be just because it is difficult to understand for ordinary people, like when you go to the street and say, let me tell you about the finest leading edge of electronics and lasers and quantum, they may not understand. But it does not negate the fact that there is a higher knowledge that gives insight to the reality.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu. So we'll continue now. We had a little pause, and I think the discussions that we have, they do help. At least they help me to further understand and kind of get some levels of clarification, because you can keep reading this. We read it one more time and we will find another level. So but it does give clarity to me. So let's get back. Chinmoydev Prabhu, was that your cat?
My cat is next to me. I sometimes have to play with my cat.
That's what I
my
was
cat
thinking.
toy.
That's what it looked like. I'm like, just wanted to make sure.
He's actually paid dandavats to our deities in our house and hears lectures all the time.
Yeah.
So very fortunate.
Yeah.
Had prashadam.
Sometimes I see him jump across like really fast. He's really fast.
Yeah.
Okay, back to Param Guru Maharaj. My contention is that when consciousness is going to feel non-conscious matter, it will have to pass through a conscious area to meet the material object. So the full perception of that material thing cannot but be conscious. And consciousness always indicates person. Meaning conscious what? Conscious entity. The moment we're saying consciousness, it's indicative of personality. First there is conception and then the material idea. The conscious world is very near and the material world is very far off. Therefore, the great rishis, whose thinking is highly developed, address whatever they find within the environment as if they are all persons. In the Vedas, the ancient scriptural literature of India, we find that the saints and the sages are always in the midst of so many persons in the background. In the background, everything is a person. Dr. Murphy. And person means thinking, feeling, willing. Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj. Thinking, feeling, willing, a living entity has three phases. And it is also the same with God and His potency. There is a subject existing first, and then His experiences. And experiences of the subtlemost character come first and are given the most importance. And when the subject is coming to the more distant area to conceive of matter, that will be the furthest point from him. He will address everything by which he is surrounded with personal conceptions. A personal conception cannot but assert that matter is far off. The direct connection of consciousness is with the shadow, the reflection of the material into the conscious world. The soul can understand that only. If matter can exist independently, then also matter has a shadow in the conscious world, and the soul is concerned with that shadow. Why? Because consciousness perceives consciousness directly. So here the material object, over there shadow. In other words, back to Param Guru Maharaj. In other words, there is the person and then the body. Just as the body is the after effect of the conscious living agent, matter is the after effect of spirit. So, that Jiva Bhoot, conscious, material energy conscious, but material energy after effect. Both conscious. irrespective of all material consciousness, that which is in direct contact with the soul is all personal. Chidabhas is something like the mental substance we have within. There are two kinds of persons, Chara and Akshara, the pure liberated soul and the soul who is struggling in matter. When liberated and non-liberated persons are mixed within the world of material transactions, whether as moving or non-moving entities, or whatever their position might be, still they should be considered persons. Since everything is a unit of consciousness, everything has personal existence. Dr. Murphy. So externally we see the Ganges as water, but in reality she is a person. Śrīdhar Mahārāj. Everything is a person. Before we go to the material conception, we must pass through the personal conception or aspect of that thing. Just a brief pause here. We said this last time, but I want to kind of reiterate it, that in whoever's read Mahabharata would understand that one of the great characters in there, Devvrat, Bhishma Pitama, is actually the son of Ganga. So we see that in recorded history, that actually what is being said here, everything is a person, is actually back in during those ages, the consciousness of human beings, you can say, at that time were so developed that they were actually at that level where they could interact with the personalities and not the material aspect. So they were actually in touch with the conscious personalities. And when we see in various conceptions, we see this thing of that, for example, Yeshua, his immaculate conception, right? If you see nearly all the main characters in Mahabharata, they're all immaculate conception. All of them. I mean, most of them, not all of them, but most of them. So such was that level of development of and evolution that evolved the consciousness at that time. Okay, back to Param Guru Maharaj. In Vrindavan, everything is conscious, but some things are posing in a passive way, but they are all conscious. The Yamuna river, the cows, the trees, the fruit, everything is conscious, spiritual, but they pose in different ways. Being able to detect the conscious characteristic in everything, the Aryans saw all of nature as conscious and personal, and addressed everything as conscious. Again, I can't help but pause here. Even material nature, Ma Durga, right? So she has a personality. And then she has her eight aspects. Ninth is the aspect of Siddhidatri, or the giver of perfection. Markandeya Rishi has said that. Pratvam Shailaputri, Dvityam Brahmacharani, Trityam Chandraghanteti. And then Kushmandeti, Chaturtakam, Panchamam Skandamateti, Shashtamam Katyayaniti, Saptamam Kalaratriti, Mahagauriti, Chashtamam, then Navmam Siddhidatri, Cha Navdurga, Prakritita. This is Prakriti, Ma Durga, 9 aspects. The Navratri that is celebrated each day is for each aspect. They are all conscious. So, and in Bhagavad Gita we just discussed, he was explaining the material side. Bhumi rapa anolo vayu kam mano buddhi revacha ahankar ityam bhinna prakritir ashtadha. That ashtadha means 8. So either you see the conscious entities or you see the ashtadha is on your vision, but they are the one and the same. Hare Krishna. Okay, let's get back to Param Guru Maharaj. Okay. Consciousness and personality are the universal basis of reality. Whatever we may experience is conscious. The reflection of a material object is within me, and the plane within me is conscious. The subject is consciousness, and whatever kind of thing the object may be, it casts its reflection into the plane of consciousness. The observer of any objective reality is involved only with consciousness from beginning to end, and can have no conception of matter apart from consciousness. Dr. Murphy, how can we differentiate consciousness from mind? Śrīdhar Mahārāj, in Bhagavad Gita, the path of differentiation between consciousness and mind is suggested. Indriyani parana hurindriye bhaya paramana. What is Atma? The soul. The spiritual conception. We have come to the world conception by a particular process. By the process of elimination, we can trace out what the mind is. It is said that the basis of the mind is acceptance and rejection, sankalp, vikalp. I want this, I don't want that. What is the mind? A thing that contains apathy and sympathy for the external world. That is the mind. We have to trace within us what that thing is. It is within us. And one has to enter into his own self and try to have some personal experience of what the mind is. Then by internal analysis, one can try to come directly in touch with the faculty of judgment, reason, intelligence, by asking, what is intelligence? Where is it within me? We should try to find that out and come in touch with that directly. We should inquire, what is the mind? It is already within me, but what is it? And what is reason within me? What is the source of the mind and intelligence? And crossing the stage of the decisive faculty, what is the soul? We must try, as a yogi does, to come in direct touch with the elements within us. Mind and intelligence are within each of us. Why should we not be able to trace out exactly what they are, to see internally what they are? Dr. Murphy, when our faith is growing in a particular direction, how can we know that our realizations are coming from our own internal self, from our inner consciousness, and not from the influence of the environment, the circumstances that surround us? Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj, the self is in a dormant state. But by some external help, it may be reawakened. Just as when one is sleeping, by external interference a man can be roused, it is something like that. Someone is dormant, but when by external help he awakes from his slumber, he again becomes aware of himself. Once he is awakened and his self-awareness has returned, he immediately knows, I was such and such, I am such and such. By the help of our friends, we may recover our health. In the same way, if we continue to apply the process of bhakti, we shall become more and more conscious of our self and of reality. We are our own guarantee. Dr. Murphy, I wanted to clarify one point. In Kapila's system of analysis, Sankhya, he says that Pradhan is that unmanifested matter which is eternal. You say that everything is consciousness. Is Pradhan also composed of consciousness? Śrīdhar Mahārāj, yes. What is material is only the misconception which is the cause of all this material existence. But it also has personality. Devi, the goddess. The world begins within misconception. When you have the proper conception, then you can read Krishna Leela everywhere. Everything will excite you about Vrindavan. You won't see the outward thing if you are relieved from misconception. A madman has a maladjusted brain. He may be in the midst of friends, but he is lost in his madness, his paranoia. When he goes back to his normal position, he finds the same thing. All friends. In the same way, everything is all right. Only the disease, our misconception, needs to be removed. So, if the panel allows me, I'd like to pause here and continue next week because it's nearly time. And let me see if I can quickly round up the team here and get this done. But as we see that the real problem is the misconception. There is nothing wrong with anything. Don't try to change the world. Just adjust yourself. Proper adjustment. And then we will find that everything is okay. So I'll be right back. Please excuse me for two seconds. And I see Nandarani Didi is also here. Dandabat Nandarani Didi.
Is it very windy in my program?
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda.
Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda.
Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
Hari Haraya Namah Krishna Yadavaya Namaha.
Hariharaya Namah Krishna Yadavaya Namaha.
Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha.
Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha.
Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan.
Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan.
Giridhari Gopinatha Madana Mohan.
Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan.
Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Chandra.
Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Chandra.
Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Rupa Sanatan Bhakta Raghunath.
Jaya Rupa Sanatan Bhakta Raghunath.
Shri Jiva Gopala Bhakta Dasa Raghunath.
Shri Jiva Gopala Bhakta Dasa Raghunath.
Ichai Gosai Kori Charana Vandan.
Jai Gosai Kuri Charana Vandan.
Jaha hoite Vignana Shabishta Puran.
Jaha hoite Vignana Sabishta Puran.
Ichai Gosai Janmui Taradas.
Jai Gosai Janmui Taradas.
Tasavara Padarenu Mora Panchagras.
Sansavara Padarenu Mora Panchagras.
Tandera Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanevas.
Tandira Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanevas.
Janame Mora Ei Abhilash.
Janame Mora Ei Abhilash.
Ichai Gosai Jabe Braja Koilabas.
Ichai Gosai Jabe Braje Koilabas.
Shri Shri Radha Krishna Nitya Lila Korila Prakash.
Shri Radha Krishna Nitya Leela Korilo Prakash.
Anande Bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan.
Anande Bolo Hari Bhaj Vrindavan.
Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Majaiyaman.
Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Madhyayaman.
Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koriyas.
Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koriyas.
Hari Nam Sankirtana ko hai Narottama Das.
Hari Nam Sankirtana ko hai Narottama Das.
Hari Haraya Namah Krishna Yadavaya Namaha.
Hariharaya Namah Krishna Yadavaya Namaha.
Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha.
Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama,
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Jai Gauranga Sundar, Jai Gauranga Sundar, Jai Gauranga Sundar, Jai Gauranga Sundar.
Jai Gauranga Sundar, Jai Gauranga Sundar, Jai Gauranga Sundar, Jai Gauranga.
Jai. I don't think there's anyone around for Jai Dhani. Okay, we'll do it.
Missing Anika.
I know. We get so used to Anika ji doing it that it feels a little odd, like, we get Jai Dhani. She spoiled us. Okay. जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रयोजक चार्य वर्ग स्तोत्र शत श्री श्रीला भक्ति सुंदर गोविंद देव गोस्वामी महाराज की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद श्रीला भक्ति रक्षक श्रीधर देव गोस्वामी महाराज की जय। जय भगवान श्रीला भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर की जय। जय विश्ववरेण्य श्रीला एसी भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय। जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। सपार्षद श्रीमन महाप्रभु की जय। रूप नुग गुरु वर्ग की जय। श्री चैतन्य सारस्वत मठ आचार्य वृंद की जय। श्री चैतन्य सारस्वत मठ सन्यासी वृंद की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। नित्याय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल।
जयराम प्रभु की जय।
Our distinguished panel, Sripad Arun Krishna Prabhu ki jai. Sripad Chinmay Dev Prabhu ki jai. Shama ji ki jai. Sangeeta ji ki jai. Nandarani Didi ki jai. And
Aka Didi ki jai. Ki jai.
Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari.
And I have just been informed that today happens to be Gita Jayanti, so on, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai.
Jai.
All right, this is stopping the stream and stop recording.